industrial centers. So this is quite an issue. Now, just to give an example, I'd like to show how population or demographic increases is related quite closely to the electricity growth rate. So you can see here to the left, just taking the UAE as an example, we can see that there's been a steady increase in population, much of it, of course, having to do with the expatriate labor forces and so on since 1980. And then we can also see a nearly vertical increase in electricity demand, and this is coming from around 1990 to 1994, where we see a sharp uptake of electricity demand. So these issues are quite important, and if the Gulf doesn't deal with it, then it's actually going to harm its industrialization plans and also its economic future. Now, what are the reasons behind the demand growth in the Gulf? Well, I mean, one of the primary reasons, of course, is what is known as the second oil price revolution that occurred, and this was about from 2001 into 2008. And now the oil price revolution, as we all remember, was the period of time after 2001 when the international price of oil increased exponentially and on an incremental basis until it peaked in around the summer, July of 2008. So this led to rapid, extremely rapid economic growth in the Gulf region. Now, there's also a demographic explosion, as I alluded to earlier, due to imported labor. And the U.S. Census Bureau, for example, estimated that the population in the Gulf would double by 2030. There's also been a major push for industrialization in the Gulf, and this has led to petrochemical expansion and also a large need for desalination projects, which is, of course, related to the demographic boom as well. And there's also been, during this period, over the last decade, increased oil capacity expansion, and much of it was due to using natural gas as the oil field reinjection. So basically, when the oil field becomes mature, what the Gulf countries would do is insert or input natural gas into that field in order to increase the oil production rates. And another issue behind this driver, which Zuhair also alluded to, was that there's an extremely low energy price in the Gulf. So citizens in the Gulf, they generally they pay extremely low rates for electricity. That's number one. And also the major industrial users only pay, on average, about $1 per MMBTU, which is the standard unit of measurement for natural gas. So this very low energy price has caused this demand rates to be, to a certain extent, artificial. And because it's artificial, it's led to a lot of wasteful practices, which we've seen, and there's really been a need for the populace to become encouraged in order to conserve electricity and power. Now, the result of all these policies has been massive blackouts in the Gulf. During the summer, as I stated earlier, most of the Gulf countries have blackouts or brownouts that they have to deal with. In 2009, the UAE, particularly the Emirate of Sharjah, had a blackout during Ramadan. And this blackout was quite pervasive, and it caused many issues for the Emirati government, because many people were quite upset that the government, with substantial natural gas reserves, was apparently unable to deal with this power blackout. And for such a long time, it lasted for about a month. So I'd like to discuss how a carbon trading platform will be able to benefit the Gulf countries, and I'd like to go into the reasons behind it, and also how a carbon trading platform would, the most optimal construction of it, and how it will be able to allow the countries to preserve their natural gas resources for future generations, as well as benefit them financially. So the revenues that are generated from the oil and gas fields on the international market, as I stated earlier, have transformed these countries into some of the wealthiest countries in the world. And as a result, many of the Gulf countries, what they've done is that they have linked many diverse sectors in order to fuel their industrialization. So we see that the military sectors in the Gulf have been linked. The economic, industrial, construction, and tourism sectors have all been linked and have all been invested in significantly in order to drive this industrialization and diversification away from being a monolithic economy. So because of the breakneck industrialization that occurred from the second oil price revolution, the Gulf countries, what they did was they diversified into many downstream energy and carbon-intensive industries. So because of this diversification, the Gulf countries have some of the highest carbon footprints in the world. And they've been under tremendous international criticism to do something about these carbon emissions. Now, the UAE has the highest carbon footprint in the world, while the other Gulf countries are actually not that far behind. The Gulf countries, excluding Yemen, emitted as a whole approximately 738 million tons of CO2 in 2008, which approximately equals about 26 tons per capita, which is extremely high. And now, some of the Gulf countries have dealt with this pressure by announcing the establishment of several environmental initiatives in order to encourage the citizenry to act in an environmentally conscious manner. In particular, Dubai and Qatar announced in 2007 that they would implement carbon trading platforms in their respective countries. Qatar and the UAE have both also taken substantive steps in order to combat their carbon emissions and energy intensity. Qatar, for instance, has become the first GCC country to join the World Bank's gas flaring initiative. And of course, gas flaring is one of the major contributors to the region's high carbon emissions. Abu Dhabi has launched the Mustar initiative, I'm certain all of you all heard of, which is a $15 billion investment in order to construct the Energy City. And Energy City is supposed to be the first city in the world which would be zero carbon and zero waste. Now, the company chosen to implement this vision was Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, which is also known as the Mustar Company, which has also invested in a broad array of clean energy investments all across the Middle East and North African region. So, before the financial crisis, Qatar and the UAE announced two competing carbon emissions trading plans. Now, the project in Dubai was supposed to be built jointly by the state-run Dubai Multi-Commodity Center and the London-listed carbon credit company, Eagle Securities, and this was supposed to be online no later than 2009. And the other proposed exchange was to be built in Doha, Qatar, by the Doha Bank in 2009. Now, each project was supposed to make its respective country the center of carbon trading in the Gulf. So there's a bit of competition between Qatar and Doha, and also this expanded out into other sectors as well. And the basic premise behind this was to take advantage of the burgeoning carbon credit, or carbon capture projects, that could potentially earn carbon emissions reduction certifications under the UN Clean Development Mechanism. However, when the global financial crisis occurred in late 2008, most of these plans were put on hold, they were scrapped, and as the Gulf countries focused all their efforts to try to find a way outside of this, or try to find a way out of this economic crisis. Now, to discuss where the Gulf countries have left off an optimal carbon trading platform for the Gulf, I'd like to go into several issues, and in particular, I'd like to speak about the three overarching concepts which are essential for any carbon trading platform. Now, of course, we have the cap and trade system, which I'm certain we're all aware of. There's also what is known as the hybrid system, which has fallen into disuse since the 1970s, but I still think that this is quite important to at least discuss and go over the general parameters of it. And there's also a carbon tax regime. Now, I would like to discuss the pros and cons of each of them in relation to their applicability to the Gulf. Now, while the mechanics differ for each system, the foundation is that they all seek to turn a previously worthless commodity, carbon dioxide, into something which is potentially quite valuable. Okay, and this is basically done by regulation.